Hello friends, in today's video we'll be talking about a sextile between Saturn and Aries and the Sun in the sign of Gemini. And a sextile between Sun and Saturn is kind of an unusual dynamic for these two archetypes because they're arch enemies, but a sextile is an easier aspect that is supposed to help us. And here the Sun represents consciousness, selfhood, authority, vitality, and the coherence of our identity, the center of our own being. On the other hand, Saturn represents negativity, negation, the erosion of certainty through time. It's the planet that represents our limitations, the hardships that we experience, pressures of life. And Saturn has a lot to do with criticism, karma, consequences, all the things that we generally don't like. In a lot of ways, the Sun is about rising up, it's about elevation, while Saturn brings us to very lowly places. Saturn loves to humble us. And if you think about it, the two symbolisms are not in resonance. They want life to unfold in very different ways, which makes this transit very interesting because we're not talking about squares or oppositions. We're talking about a sextile which has a flair of developmental aspect to it. It's creating an opening. And they're not like automatic harmonies the way that we get them out of trines. But it's an opportunity for cooperation of two forces to come together and work together. And what I want to let you know from the get-go, this is not one of those videos where Saturn and Sun come to meet and Saturn's trying to destroy the self, which is the Sun. Nor is this the Sun having an unrestricted expression of its ego where Saturn's like, okay, I got to come and humble you now. This sextile is more of like a soft reality testing of Saturn to see the self, this identity, self-expression that we've built. Can it survive is reality testing? Because Saturn's always going to do what Saturn is. Just because it's a sextile, it's not that Saturn's going to become a Venus or a Mercury suddenly. And when you put Saturn and Sun together, the limitation that Saturn brings, it becomes a catalyst for a consciousness, which is the Sun. So in some ways, Saturn right now is revealing the complexity of reality, or reality to us, which is making us become more conscious, which is going to unfold itself through some sort of an interaction that we're going to have in our life. And I want us to remember the Sun in the sign of Gemini, it is in the domain of interactivity. It's about language, multiplicity, communication, and in general exchange of things. And Saturn sitting in the sign of Aries, in a sign that is very self-determined with a lot of existential assertion, and Saturn's trying to show us how to employ this just in the right amount. So I would say the deeper question of this sextile is how much we're able to maintain this self-integrity, staying internally coherent, while we'll find ourselves moving through competing ideas, perspectives, conversations we might not fully be comfortable with, and just in general, relational complexities are coming up with this transit. I would argue that this transit is trying to make us more aware, give us greater consciousness by becoming more structurally aware of how we think, even how we emotionally interpret reality, because the ruler of the sign of Gemini, Mercury, is right now in an emotional sign, which is the sign of Cancer. It's about understanding how we communicate, the impact of our communication, and how it is that through our self-expression verbally in our exchanges, we try to assert ourselves. This is kind of like our identity being tested against real world contact and the people that are within it. And before moving to the details of this video, as I mentioned in the previous video, June is a very active month. There'll be plenty of videos coming up. My health feels better, so I feel more equipped to do more videos as well. And the video after this will be that lovely conjunction of Jupiter and Venus in the sign of Cancer. If you want to catch all of these videos coming up, please do remember to subscribe, press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you when the videos are released. And as usual, I want to go through the layers. I want you guys to be able to synthesize on your own, taking all these layers and seeing it relative to your own chart, where these planets are sitting in which house, in which sector of your chart. And I want us to start with going over Saturn in Aries. This is the way to understand the rationale of why am I making these delineations. So if we start with Aries itself, Aries is the emergence of the self into existence. It's like a burst of energy that just ignites into existence. This is the moment when consciousness separates itself from the undifferentiated field that is the ultimate consciousness. It is that moment where that differentiation declares itself as I am. And this is why Aries is deeply connected to this notion of individuality. It's related to individuation, self-assertion, and just the way that we direct ourselves through our lives. As I've said this in other videos too, Aries doesn't wait for permission to exist. It initiates, it acts, it projects itself out into the reality with a lot of bravery. But of course, we have Saturn here, and Saturn's debilitated in Aries, so things become complicated. And that's because Saturn slows things down. So when it's in the sign of Aries, which has a sign that has a lot to do with our instinct, it slows the instinctive movement of Aries. It's introducing self-consciousness and extreme awareness of consequence to our movement. So Aries, at its best, it wants to assert. But with Saturn here and the friction that it's causing, it's forcing us to confront. And what we're confronting is our own fears of action. It's making us confront the places within ourselves where we distrust ourselves to move, where we anticipate failure, even before we begin to do something. So Saturn in Aries can create this feeling of inner divide because there's this need to assert. We're in the sign of Aries. But then at the same time, with every thought, there's this assessment of its cost. So it's creating hesitation here. And in the first Saturn in Aries video that I made, I said that if we want to know how Saturn's behaving in the sign of Aries, at all times during that 2.5 years, we have to pay attention to where ruler of Aries, Mars, has gone. If Mars is dignified, Saturn's getting support. If Mars is not, then Saturn's suffering and Saturn's going to be extra cruel. And in this moment, Mars is in the sign of Taurus. It's not where Mars likes to be. It's not comfortable there, but it is an earth sign. This Mars is not going to move impulsively. It feels its feet on the ground. It's going to move steadily and deliberately. This Mars knows how to conserve its energy. It's going to take a little bit of time to commit to a direction. But when it commits, it just keeps moving and moving forward. It doesn't have an explosive outward movement, but it has the earth, the ground, to have itself directed. So this moment's showing us what it means to have stable assertion, stable movements with a lot of patience. The sign of Taurus has a lot of patience in it. It's enduring. So we do have this inner forbearance right now, even for the things that Saturn might be doing. I would say what we're developing just between Mars in Taurus and Saturn in Aries is self-consistency, which is so important because you can't rely on emotional momentum and burst. When you have inner consistency in your soul, it doesn't matter how you feel. Like a soldier, you're just going to go to war. You're just going to do the task. This is kind of like what's coming out of this combination at this moment, which can really help us find our center of gravity. So no matter what, we always know how to get back on our feet. It's to know how to move under all circumstances despite fear, self-doubt. I would argue that Saturn in Aries by itself, one of the things that is doing in a very cruel way a lot of times, because that's Saturn, he's a malefic, he needs to do it that way, is to show us how much we need to develop these internal structures to regulate ourselves. Because it keeps showing us how so many interactions are destabilizing us. So many happenings are destabilizing us. How disagreements come to threaten us. It's as if okay, buddy said whatever, it doesn't matter. That's their opinion. They're allowed to have their opinion, but it just sets us off on the wrong trajectory suddenly. It wants us to understand that every external pressure that we encounter cannot come to reorganize our entire life. This is what Saturn's going to do through Aries in general. So with that Mars right now too in the sign of Taurus is about how do I just keep marching forward? I'm in mud. It doesn't matter. I got to get out of this mud. I got to just keep marching forward. And through this is the way that we're going to find out what is that primary ingredient that holds our sense of self and our identity together when the entirety of the world seems to be resisting us. This is one of the important lessons of just Saturn in Aries with the ruler currently in the sign of Taurus. And before bringing Sun and Saturn together into the sextile dialogue, I do want to talk about what the Sun is doing in the sign of Gemini. So first and foremost, Gemini in itself, relative to the sign of Aries that we just talked about, is introducing a completely different existential environment. One of the things that I said, Aries establishes its sense of identity through this idea of separation, because Mars also cuts and severs things, right? The ruler of Aries. But in Gemini, with its ruler as Mercury, the most relational planet, our consciousness gets developed through interaction and comparison of things. Our development is contingent on moving between ideas, exchanging ideas, connecting with different people. So Gemini discovers reality by entering into relationship with language, information, ideas, people, conversations, systems of thought, and competing interpretations of experience. And there's another contrast worth mentioning here. The sign of Aries does things by itself because it's very self-sufficient and individualistic. But the sign of Gemini is that moment where we leave our isolation and enter into the social field. And once when we do that, we can't be so self-reliant. We got to be diplomatic. Now we got to compromise. Certainty becomes compromise in some way. Like in the sign of Aries, you could say, I don't have a plan B. It's only plan A. That's all I know. But when you come into the sign of Gemini, there has to be plan A, plan B, plan C, maybe plan D. The environment of Gemini is plural. And that means different people can think differently, say different things, interpret the world completely different, and have different perspectives, and is completely fine with Gemini. The more, the merrier. The more conscious I'm becoming, the more aware I'm becoming. Bring it on. Like Aries can't handle that, but the sign of Gemini can. Like Aries moves in a straight line trajectory. Gemini, like Mercury, it zigzags. It goes back and forth. The sign of Gemini is about exposing our consciousness to multitudes. It's introducing complexity into the system. Complexity of the system is being revealed to the consciousness. And this is one of the reasons why Gemini has been called like two-faced or is hard to pin down, because Gemini destabilizes simplistic identity structures. And we all have this experience at some point because we feel like, yeah, I totally understand myself. I clearly know myself until we come into relation with another person. When they challenge us, when they communicate their perspective, when we get to see their interpretation, a lot of the holes in our own argument and in our own sense of self gets exposed. So we're becoming conscious of a much bigger picture suddenly. And when we bring the sun, the brightest planet, into the sign of Gemini, it illuminates what our consciousness is about through this process of exchange. This is one expression of consciousness coming into relation with another form of consciousness. And for those of us who have sun in Gemini, this just comes naturally because this is how we're wired. But people who don't have, let's say, anything in Gemini, every time sun comes through Gemini, one of the things that they come to see is that they lose control over their environments where they have to make exchanges with other people. It's like sun in Gemini suddenly comes in and it exposes our inner contradictions in ways that we can become defensive. It shows us where we're rigid. And when we lose our directional coherence as soon as another perspective is introduced. Like every time we have a transit there, we're getting to see how much we have grown in a year. Every time sun comes back into Gemini, how adaptable have you become? How flexible have you become to hold multitude of ideas at the same time? So it's testing our mental flexibility. It's making us conscious of our capacity for complexity and how we're able to actually remain stable on a center like the sun in a world of multiplicity that is constantly changing and without us falling apart. And this becomes even more important at this time because we're having that dialogue between Saturn and Sun. So not only the flexibility of it is being revealed, but so is our intellectual endurance, which is our capacity to move between different perspectives while still understanding what our own self-orientation is. So there's a whole bunch of different things coming in all at once. But let's just talk about this dialogue, the sextile now between Saturn and Sun. So as I mentioned earlier, Saturn in the field of Aries and with the ruler in the sign of Taurus at this moment is introducing the principle of durability. Like Saturn doesn't care about our momentary convictions. It wants to understand that we understand our structural integrity that can withstand the test of time. And this is exactly why Saturn often feels very harsh and cruel, because it's always creating some sort of a hardship to expose what can't endure the pressure of reality. And Saturn itself represents reality. So if you don't have forbearance for Saturn, you will break. And I would say with this sextile, reality itself starts to function as a testing mechanism for us. Like this Saturn wants us to see that we have this thing that we think so highly. But Saturn's like, I want you to understand that your thoughts actually don't have any depth. You're just grazing the surface. All these social interactions that you have and exchanges that you have, none of them have depth. All that you're doing is you're looking for validation that someone tells you that you matter and that you exist, that your sun is in existence. It wants to show us that your sense of identity actually collapses with the slightest bit of criticism, and your conviction disappears the moment some opposition or hardship comes into the picture. You got to remember, Saturn's cruel. It doesn't matter that it's a sextile. Saturn's still going to be criticizing, cold, objective, and not pleasant. So Saturn's always going to introduce friction. And that's because friction reveals the underlying inner structure that's at play in our life and in ourselves. Like Saturn wants you to prove yourself all the time. Like a bridge is only a good bridge if it can bear the weight for many, many years. And that mind that's in the sign of Gemini and that self that's now in the sign of Gemini, it needs to prove itself in moments of contradiction. Like Saturn is going to do something where reality doesn't necessarily cooperate with us. Like it doesn't match our preferred narrative. But this test is making us more conscious of how we behave in our interactions in the world. So it's like a medicine that tastes like crap, but it's going to make your cold go away. So this isn't necessarily Saturn attacking the sun. It's actually strengthening the sun within us, but through some form of a resistance, some form of a contradiction, criticism. We're getting to see some of the holes in the fabric of our own being, especially with the sun lighting it up there too now, in the ways that we think we communicate and interact with people specifically. And this transit is actually going to help our sense of self to understand what it means to be more enduring, to be psychologically and intellectually more stable, what it means to have a greater realism about ourselves. So in some ways, Saturn is testing the sun within us for us to understand our self-concept and what it's all about. When is in the multiplicity of the world, when it's in the process of exchange, we're understanding what things have influence on us, where we are not at the seat of our own power. That's the reality testing of Saturn. I know I want you to understand why I'm giving this slant to this video, because also the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is in the sign of Cancer. So the mechanism of how we experience things are in a water sign. So this means the mind, that Gemini thing, which can be very detached, impartial, unbiased. It doesn't have that quality right now with the sun there because the ruler is in the sign of Cancer. So we're not talking about processing the world through cognition alone. Right now, we are filtering all this multiplicity, the interactions that we're having through our emotional world as well. There's something complete about this moment because we got the fire sign, we got the earth sign where Mars is sitting, we got the air sign where the sun is sitting, now we got the water sign where Mercury is sitting. Like all of these are interconnected right now. So Mercury in the sign of Cancer can feel some vulnerability through these interactions. That's why it's bringing that thing up into the surface, where Saturn's like, yeah, I want you to see that. And Mercury is deeply feeling it and thinking about it too right now because it is a thinking planet. So Mercury also has a capacity right now to think about our personal history, our subjective associations, to understand where we falter, where our sense of self can't remain stable and centered in certain exchanges. Why it's failing Saturn's reality testing. Like this Mercury in the sign of Cancer is like, I want to understand why the external world affects me so much. So this transit is exposing the emotional consequences of our interactions, which we all feel. Sometimes we're with people like, I feel burnt out. I feel like I lost myself in that a few hours that I was with these people having these conversations. So right now we're supposed to understand how words enter our nervous system, how conversations that we have just linger in our psyche, how the emotional memories that we have are impacting our interpretation. We have to understand how the past experiences that we've had in life are somehow becoming our present perception, as if we can't have another perspective. This is like Saturn's glitchiness is helping us see all of this. And this is actually a good thing, even though it feels glitchy and unpleasant. And this is also super important for the sign of Gemini to understand, because it's a sign that can move very quickly between different experiences, words, conversation, people. But having the ruler right now, which is in the sign of Cancer, is a sign of retention, holding in, and absorbing. It's almost like we're having a double mind. We're acting in the world and we're saying that we're totally getting fragmented. And there's this other part of us. It's like, what the hell is that? It's like I'm watching myself and I can see it. And of course, Saturn is also squaring Mercury by sign, right? So Saturn's putting a lot of pressure on our emotional reflexes too. So if we come to justify it, Saturn's there as our reality testing. Like we'll see where suddenly we become insecure. Suddenly we get into defensive mode where our past thinking is like interfering into the present thoughts, trying to reorganize everything that we're trying to do in the moment. This is why this sextile is psychologically valuable. In a lot of ways, we're learning how to be present, how we can be in an uncomfortable interaction and stay with it, and knowing that it's okay. We don't have to shut down. We don't have to retreat, react impulsively, or to protect ourselves through emotional withdrawal. We can be in the sign of Gemini. We can interact and we'll be fine. We're learning how to be fine. And when we take all of these factors together, everything that I've discussed so far, we can see that the synthesis of this transit is asking a question, which is how do you remain yourself while you're moving through a complex world, a world of multiplicity, you as a singular individual, as your sun self, who's indivisible. How do you walk in a world that has been divided into infinite things that's at the same time trying to have an impact on you? Do you know how to move through that and still keep your own center? So Saturn's testing us so that we understand this. This is about developing a mature form of self-assertion. Saturn's about maturity. Aries is about self-assertion, which is knowing how to direct ourselves in an ever-shifting and a moving world. It's about understanding how to have a stable sense of presence. And this is super important because a lot of people have very strong identities in isolation. When I'm by myself, I am in control. I am disciplined. I know what I think, what I feel, what I want. But the minute that certainty gets challenged, some variation, some variables introduced to that isolated equation, the entire thing falls apart. This sextile is showing us that relational life always introduces pressure with or without Saturn. Saturn's just pressurizing it a hell of a lot more right now. And especially with Saturn here, it's showing us that relational life is filled with disagreements, naysayers, with delays, with people who critique you, dispute you, misunderstand you, don't like you, and that they are completely different than you. How are you going to deal with it? Do you still have a sense of self? Do you still know how to connect with other people in the world? So this is about having a stable and an enduring self that can just keep moving through things, that Mars and sign of Taurus too. You know, this is about us encountering contradiction without disintegrating. It's about being able to communicate, have an equal exchange without surrendering ourselves. It's about how do I become adaptive, but not directionless. Like I don't have to adapt to you and become you. But I need to understand how to adapt to your ways. We need to learn how to dance and cooperate, the sign of Gemini. And we also have to learn, this is very important. This is an important skill set to learn in life. How to stay open to life without becoming psychologically porous. So everything can't enter you. You're open, but it doesn't mean it can enter you. You're open to interact with it. And to go back to Mars and Taurus for a second, I want us to realize we have this tenacity right now, that we have the stabilized movement. Even though the external world might be glitching out, there's something in us that we're like, I can keep moving through this one step at a time. So it's the sign of Taurus, that earthiness of it is making the movement of Mars, which is the ruler of Aries, very measured rather than reactive. And Saturn likes that. Saturn wants us to be measured. Pause, think, refrain from action, create some space, some silence between stimuli and action, reaction. So this Mars knows right now how to move deliberately, not impulsively. It's very grounded instead of being explosive, and Saturn appreciates that right now. So there's a very good synergy between Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, except between Aries and Cancer. That should be a video on its own. Oh, probably will be once when Mercury and Saturn get closer in degrees. And I would say that the highest expression of this sextile is for us to understand how to have self-composure. It's the ability to remain internally organized, while reality externally is remaining very dynamic, and it can even be challenging. This is kind of going from being reactive relative to the multiplicity of our social interactions to being proactive. And we're getting to the end of this video. And before closing this video, please do remember to share, like, subscribe, and please comment. Let me know how you're experiencing this transit, like the recent interactions, communications, that you're having that moment of, oh my God, I'm having this conversation, but I'm kind of like the witness of myself and I'm seeing all of my own glitchiness. Why do I have these glitchy feelings right now? How do I move through them? That impulse to want to actually remedy it, to overcome it, to remain as a center, no matter what's happening externally. This is the kind of experiences that can come up. Let me know how you're experiencing this. I'd love to know. And if you want a reading of this transit or your birth chart to understand why you have had the experiences that you have, what the path has been, and where it's all leading, you can go to my website at parisayazdi.com, or you can go to the email in the description box of this video, because my website might still be under construction. This has been taking forever. I really have to learn how to do coding because this website's all API. But yeah, you can go to the websites and just contact me directly. And now to close. I would say that one of the more profound aspects of this transit is for us to understand this notion of identity, which belongs to the sun symbolism, doesn't occur in isolation, doesn't hold in isolation as our true identity. Because a lot of us think that we are confident, we are intelligent, we are capable, we are stable, we are self-aware, and internally coherent. But life reveals the falsity of this to us almost always when we come into relation with other people. The sign of Gemini is through contact and interaction that we get to see our inner contradictions and where we fall short, not relative to other people, but relative to the standard that we're holding ourselves up to. And this interaction, when we bring Saturn into it, is going to keep us in contact with something, is going to elongate the duration of that time. And that makes things super difficult because, you meet someone at the beginning, you become friends, and they're like the greatest person. But are they still the greatest person 5 years later after so many things have happened, so many times they've let you down, you let them down? Saturn has a tendency to test things through time. So it's going to create some stickiness with certain situations and people. So there's enough time for us right now to see what's unfolding too. And because this is a sextile, this is an opportunity to become more refined. And to become more refined because we're contacting the world's contacting us. We're creating this interactivity and this exchange. Sextiles won't destroy us. I don't think any aspect actually destroys us, but sometimes we get destroyed by certain accumulated situations in life. But sextiles are not even representing that. And I think our goal with the sextile is not that I'm not going to be touched by the world. Rather that I can move through the complexity of the world. It can even touch me, but it needs my permission, that sun within me. I say if it can enter or not. And we're not going to abandon ourselves with this perspective, that perspective, and the hecticness that can happen in the sign of Gemini. And if you think about it, the ability to be able to do this, we literally need Sun, Saturn, the sign of Aries, and the sign of Gemini. Because the ability to keep your own center requires you to have a solid inner structure. You need to have endurance, Saturn, stability, the sun, proper form of self-communication. Now we're bringing Aries and Gemini in relation to each other. And the willingness to refine ourselves through reality itself, which is that thing I was saying at the beginning. Saturn becomes a catalyst for our consciousness to become more conscious. So even though this is a sextile, this transit can actually feel a little demanding because we have a malefic Saturn aspecting a mild malefic, which is the sun. They are both going to act a little too boldly, too harshly. So they're never comfortable. Like if we have a sextile between two benefics, completely a different ballgame. But this sextile is creating or constructing a situation where we understand something about ourselves that's very durable. This is about a self. no longer dependent on ideal conditions in order to remain whole and to have a sense of self. It has a sense of self, it has that stable center, but at the same time, it is not threatened to move into the fluidity of the world. And this makes me think of Goethe, who talks about the development of character actually needs the stream of the world to be developed. So the self, to become more conscious, actually needs to put itself into this world of multiplicity, into this airy domain of Gemini, to have the willingness to be moved by the world and yet know what that center is and not to compromise that. And I think this is the lesson of this sextile. And we've gotten to the end of the video. And before closing the video, I'd like to leave us with a wish. And my wish is that I hope this transit helps us build a self that can move through the complexity of the world and to do it without abandoning our own center. I wish for us to think clearly, to communicate honestly, and to remain internally coherent, even though life is always asking us to refine ourselves. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.